On May 30th, 2005, a group of exhausted American high school students gathered in the lobby of a Holiday Inn in Aruba ahead of their flight back home. They'd flown to the Caribbean island as part of a high school graduation trip and had spent the last few days lying on the beach, partying in clubs, and drinking in the island's bars. But as the adult chaperones counted the students assembled in the lobby, they realized that one was missing: Natalee Holloway. The 7 chaperones had no choice. They had more than 100 other students to think of and a flight to catch. So one of the adults called Natalee's mother and told her that the 18-year-old had not shown up that morning. And then the group set off for the airport. As the flight took off, Natalee's friends anxiously assumed that she'd overslept. But Natalee's mother, Beth, had a bad feeling. She was convinced that something terrible had happened to her daughter, a bright, serious, straight-A student set to attend the University of Alabama on full scholarship. And tragically, Beth was soon proven right. Natalee Holloway would never be seen alive again. Her disappearance launched a mystery that would endure for almost 2 decades. The blonde, blue-eyed teenager from Alabama had last been seen at a club called Carlos and Charlie's, where witnesses remembered seeing her talking to a tall Dutch teenager. As the night came to an end around 1 a.m., closing time, the bar played Sweet Home Alabama for Natalee and her classmates. Then the teenagers headed out into the night to catch cabs and return to their hotel. But Natalee didn't go straight back to the hotel. Instead, witnesses remembered her getting into a car with the tall Dutchman. What happened to Natalee Holloway next? As the years dragged on, the mystery only deepened. The investigation into her disappearance came to revolve around the man she was last seen with, a 17-year-old Dutch national named Joran van Sloot, who had started hanging around Natalee and her classmates during their trip. When questioned by police, van Sloot insisted that he dropped her off at her hotel, alive and unharmed. But van Sloot's story twisted and turned with each retelling. Then, in 2023, while serving time for an unrelated murder, he announced that he would finally tell the truth. This is the full story of Natalee Holloway's 2005 disappearance, from her last night alive to how the shocking case unfolded in the years that followed. You're listening to History Uncovered, brought to you by the digital publisher All That's Interesting, where we explore the uncharted corners of the natural world and the world past. I'm All That's Interesting staff writer Kalina Fraga.
And I'm All That's Interesting staff writer Austin Harvey.
Today, we're investigating the 2005 disappearance of Natalee Holloway in Aruba. So you don't remember this story when it was sort of like breaking and everything in 2005?
I was 9 in 2005.
I see, yeah. So you were not really
I do
watching
not
the news.
remember this. No.
Yeah, it kind of left an impression. I don't know, just like this, that she had disappeared and how strange it was and that they never found her.
Yeah, 2005 is recent. Like,
yeah,
you know,
recent-ish.
like recent-ish. Compared to some of the other, like we talked about the Easdal woman that was...
Oh, like the 70s or something?
Late 70s, early 80s, something like that.
Yeah.
It was a lot more common, I think, back then to go missing. We have a couple podcasts on like more recent ones. Amy Lynn Bradley.
She's going to come up in this story.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
She was on a cruise ship, though. I guess this was in Aruba, so probably a little bit of overlap.
There's actually
there.
a connection to Amy Lynn Bradley that I'll get to.
Oh, okay.
A little bit later. But yeah, I mean, there was also this like discussion when Natalee Holloway went missing that like, why is this case getting so much attention? And it's like, oh, because she's, blonde, blue-eyed, a white girl.
Right.
But it was also just a very strange thing that happened. Like,
I mean, yeah. It's not every day that someone goes missing on vacation.
Yeah. So let's get into it. Yeah, Natalee Holloway, before she went missing, was a pretty normal person. She grew up in Alabama. She got good grades, involved in things like student government and the dance team. Her mother says that she never drank, had a boyfriend, or had sex before this trip.
Interesting.
So she was a little bit like naive about some things, perhaps.
Yeah. Or, I mean, well, yeah, that, or I was going to say, I don't know if we're all telling our parents
that
when
too,
we're
perhaps
drinking and having sex and
right.
things like that. Not to like cast doubt on her character.
Her mother insists, but by 2005, she'd been admitted to the University of Alabama. She was going to go there on full scholarship. But before that was going to happen, Natalee and her class, there was a trip to Aruba that had happened a couple of years before then. And Natalee, unsurprisingly wanted to go. And her mom was
So
all
this
for
was
it.
like a high school
Yeah, high school
planned
graduation trip.
Okay.
It's going to be 124 students and 7 adult chaperones.
Okay.
And that Natalee's stepbrother, who's older, had gone before. And, so it was a tradition. Nothing bad had happened the last couple of years.
School sanctioned seems like, everything's taken care of. It's going to be safe experience.
Yeah. And, it's Aruba. It's a beautiful tropical island. And
sure, people go to Aruba all the time.
Yeah, gorgeous. So her father was sort of reluctant, but eventually he caved and was like, okay, that's fine. You can go. So on May 26, 2005, Natalee and her classmates go to Aruba. The first couple of days, the trip is pretty short. It's only from the 26th to the 29th. But
so not even a full week.
Yeah, it's like paradise. They could lie on the beach all day, come back to the hotel, take a nap, and then go out. And because the drinking age was 18, they could drink legally. So that was kind of like a fun party atmosphere to things.
Yeah, when I was in high school, my high school girlfriend was 2 years older than me and went to Aruba and drank because she was 18. Yeah.
When I was in high school, I went on an exchange to France where I think the drinking age might be 18, but it's like very unenforced. And I went with my host sister to a grocery store. We were 16 and she just like bought all this liquor. And I was like, what? Like, what's going on? I had no idea. But that's the French. Anyway, so Natalee, on May 29th, that's the last night of their trip. They go to the casino, which is in the hotel, and they meet this young man who says that he's 19 and that he's from Holland. He's really this guy named Joran van der Sloot, who's 17. He's from the Netherlands, but he moved to Aruba at a young age, so he knows the island and everything really well.
Interesting. Holland is...
The Netherlands, like, it's the same.
Netherlands.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was just trying to determine, like, how different would his accent be, but probably pretty similar.
It'd be the same. Plus, so Aruba is part of the Netherlands. So, it's like...
Wow.
Yeah. So they meet this guy. He's young, but he has sort of like a spotty history already. He has a history of lying. He an ex-girlfriend. I mean, this stuff came out later, so I guess take it with a small grain of salt. But given everything that happened, maybe not that small of a grain. He had an ex-girlfriend who told the press later that she broke up with him because of his problems with lying.
So just kind of like a compulsive
liar. His mother said he'd been a happy kid who kind of lost his way. And while they were living in Aruba, he would sneak out of the house pretty frequently to go gambling.
Hence meeting him at a casino.
Yeah. So on this last night of the trip...
He's a year younger than everybody who's on this trip then.
Yeah.
In actuality.
Yes. And to her friends, he seems pretty normal, just an average guy, but tall. And he's 6'5". So that's very tall.
Yeah, that's tall.
He's tall. So he stands out in a crowd. So on this last night, they started the casino and then everyone goes to this bar called Carlos and Charlie's. Which Natalee's mother had heard bad things about from when her stepson went in 2003. He apparently told a story where he saw some men trying to get girls to leave the bar with them, and he felt like it was sort of suspicious that he stepped in. And this is where the Amy Lynn Bradley connection is. So Amy Lynn Bradley was this young woman who disappeared from a cruise ship. She was on a family trip, and she disappeared while they were in between destinations. They were about to dock somewhere. She just vanished. And shortly afterwards, it kind of came out that there were waiters on board who told her that had paid special attention to her, and they said they wanted to take her to Carlos and Charlie's in Aruba.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of rumors about like Amy Lynn Bradley maybe being sold into human trafficking.
Yes. There's this photograph. We actually have a podcast on her from like 100 years ago, but there's a photograph that someone emailed to her parents that looks like her, like it may be an older version of her, like in bed and kind of, I think guys wearing like underwear, and it's sort of hard to tell if it's the same person or not, but that's just like one possibility of what happened to her.
Right. But interesting that Carlos and Charlie's would come up twice.
Yes.
And that they already said it's kind of a suspicious place.
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly. And now this is where Natalee and her classmates are. But while they're there, it all seems like pretty normal. You know, there's more than 100 students in the bar. They're kind of taking over the whole space. Joran is there. He's drinking and dancing with all the Americans. And the mood is really light. You know, when they all prepare to leave around 1 a.m., the bar plays Sweet Home Alabama as kind of like a farewell to these kids. But as the bar is closing, there's kind of like this chaos as everyone's trying to get a cab, and Natalee gets separated from her friends, which is not good. So she's separated from the crowd, and witnesses think they see her go off with Joran and these two other men, Deepak and Satish Kalpo, who are friends of his.
Interesting.
Yes. So this leads us now to the next morning, May 30th. The chaperones have gathered all the students in the lobby of the Holiday Inn where they're staying. They're doing like a head count, and they're one short, and it's Natalee. But they have to catch their flight, so they leave.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a tough situation to be in.
Right.
As a chaperone.
Yeah. I mean, I think they optimistically perhaps thought that she'd overslept or something, or I don't know.
Yeah. But even still, I mean, I feel like there should have been a head count like the night, I don't know, whatever. One of the adults calls Natalee's mother and says, I mean, so Natalee didn't show up this morning. And Natalee's mother immediately is like, something horrible happened. Because Natalee is this straight A student, doesn't get into trouble, something bad happened. So she and her husband, who's Natalee's stepfather, immediately go to Aruba to try to figure out what happened. And it becomes clear pretty quickly what did happen. I mean, they ask around at the Holiday Inn and they learn about Joran. And one staffer tells Natalee's mother that he tends to prey on young female tourists. So not good from the start. Yeah, so he already had a reputation for doing this kind of thing.
He had a reputation. They're able to track him down, and Joran, speaking, to Natalee's parents, tells them in pretty explicit terms that they hooked up in his car, which is just like a creepy thing to do.
Yeah, don't tell the girls. I mean,
you can be like, yeah, just I don't know.
Yeah, you can do that tactfully.
And he didn't, which I think is just like a weird.
It's a pretty telling sign.
Yeah, very telling. He also says that he dropped her off at the hotel, but the hotel has surveillance footage. She never is dropped off at the hotel. Meanwhile, Natalee's parents are trying to get the help of the police in Aruba, and they're just super unhelpful. One tells Natalee's mother that he needs to have his frosted flakes before he can deal with her.
Wow.
Yeah. And then, Natalee's father, her stepfather is there on the island now, but her father flies to the island, and the police tell him that Natalee is probably out partying, that a lot of girls in Aruba hook up with drug dealers and then just are sort of like drugged out for a few days and then they reappear.
Okay, well, it sounds like these guys aren't doing their job.
No.
If you know this regularly, if you're like, there's a ton of drug dealers around here, girls are always disappearing. It's like, do your job.
Right.
You're the police.
And they're not. They're so unhelpful.
Oh my God. Shocker.
Then in June 2005, so pretty soon after she disappears, Joran, Deepak, and Satish are all arrested. But then they're released in September. It's not enough evidence to hold them. And Joran, meanwhile, keeps telling different stories about what happened. In an interview in 2006, he says that he left Natalee just sitting on the beach. He said, the last time I saw her, she was sitting on the sand by the ocean, which just doesn't seem...
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, the second anyone starts changing their story, it's like, hey.
Right. A little suspicious. Then in 2008, this drug dealer is paid to secretly record Joran, who then appeared to confess to Natalee's murder. He says that he and Natalee had sex, and then she had a seizure and died. And then Joran says that he asked a friend to help get rid of her body, and the friend took her out to sea, and Joran says he threw her out like an old rag, which is
First of
also
all,
pretty horrible.
Yeah, horrible. Secondly, what would cause the seizure? That's so weird.
It's like Joran was like, she just randomly had a seizure and died.
Right after we had sex. How convenient.
Yeah.
And even if, okay. I mean, obviously, I'm like sitting here getting frustrated about this. We obviously know this guy's guilty, like, because information has since come out during, the years between then and now. Mm-hmm. But I'm like, just to pick apart, even if that were true, at that point, he had not done anything wrong.
Yeah.
You call the police, you're like, oh my God, I just had sex with this person. Now they had a seizure. Like,
yeah,
can we
help.
get them to the hospital? Can we do something? You wouldn't just be like, oh, wow, that sucks. I guess we have to throw her into the ocean.
Yeah, it's pretty psychopathic. So.
Yeah.
At this point, the case is reopened, but then Joran says he was lying and nothing really happens. Again, it's like there's no evidence here. There's no body.
Right.
And I think this is one reason why I remember the case is that every now and then they'd find like a bone or something in Aruba and it'd be like, is Natalee Holloway like found? And it was never her bone. So then in 2010, Joran does a really skeevy thing and he emails the Holloway family lawyer and says for $25,000 up front and another $225,000 later, he'll reveal the location of Natalee's body. So they get in touch with the FBI and FBI says, okay, see what he says. So Sloot, he leads the lawyer to a house in Aruba and says, after getting some money, he says that his late father buried Natalee in the foundation. And then he changes his story again, and he says that she died accidentally. In his telling, he picked her up, she asked to be put back down, and he threw her down, and she hit her head and died.
Oh my God.
I know. The lawyer tells him this intel is worthless, and Sloot says he was lying anyway and flies to Peru for a poker tournament.
Oh my God.
I know. And then the case takes another very violent twist. While in Peru, actually on the exact day, the 5-year anniversary of Natalee Holloway's disappearance, Joran Sloot meets a 21-year-old woman named Stephanie Flores, and they go back to his room together, and only he comes out. Her body is found in his room a few days later. She's been beaten to death, and it's pretty clear who killed her. There's surveillance footage of them in the hotel together. So he's arrested in Chile, and he says that he killed her in a fit of rage. And again, his story changes, I mean, unsurprisingly.
Of course,
he's just like a liar. At first, he says they were playing poker in his room, and a message about Natalee popped up on his computer. Flores got really upset and hit him, so he killed her. And then he later said that he caught her reading about Natalee on his computer, and he just flew into a rage and murdered her because of that.
In either case, that's not an excuse, right?
No, it's a horrible...
It's like, well, she made me mad. It's like, okay, you don't get to murder the woman over that. Like,
he said, I didn't want to do it. The girl intruded in my life.
Oh my God.
But then he retracts his confession. But his mother thinks he's guilty. She said, I felt he had nothing to do with the disappearance of Natalee Holloway in 2005. He had left her on the beach. I still believe that. But Stephanie, he may have killed.
It's pretty bad when your own mother is being like, yeah.
Right.
Probably.
This one he might have killed. Yeah.
He might have done it.
That's pretty bad. So then a couple years later in 2012, two things happen. Natalee Holloway is declared dead. And the next day, actually, Joran Sloot is sentenced to 28 years in prison for Flores' murder. And he admits that he killed her. Fast forward 11 years, he is extradited to the U.S. to face extortion charges for trying to get money from Natalee's family. And he agrees to finally tell the truth about what happened in Aruba all these years later. He says that she wanted to go straight back to the hotel, but he asked his friends to drop them off a little ways away so they could walk together. At some point, he says he lays Natalee down on the beach and starts kissing her. She asks him to stop. He says he then pursues her and she kicks him in the crotch. And he says, when she knees me in the crotch, I get up on the beach and I kick her extremely hard in the face. So she goes down. She seems to be knocked out or maybe even dead. And then he takes a cinder block from nearby and like bashes her head in. And then he says he rolled her body into the ocean, which doesn't, I feel like there was another step missing there somewhere. Like,
yeah.
Wouldn't she just wash back? But,
I mean, yeah, unless you wade out far enough, maybe, so that the tide, I've never thrown a body in the ocean, so I don't know.
But that's his story. And it's finally, what he says is the truth. And he said he hopes it gives the family closure. And then he says, he's found Christ, and that's
so we
kind
should forgive him.
Yeah.
Is that the implication? Oh my God.
I mean, the horrible thing is like, she disappears in 2005 and he doesn't tell the truth until 2023. That's so
18
long
years later. Yeah.
To make the family like wait and wonder. And, I think he, in all these stories he told at one point, he'd like suggested that he'd sold her into sexual slavery, like Amy Lynn Bradley maybe was. Right. And as horrible as that is, it's like a tiny grain of hope that maybe she's still alive somewhere. And
right. I don't know. Which fate's worse, right? In that situation.
Yeah.
What do you hope for in the end? I'm not equipped to answer that question, but wow.
It's pretty bad. It's just like the family was like, oh, she's missing, but maybe somewhere she's alive.
Right.
And actually she's been dead this entire time. And he knew that. And he knew how much pain he was causing, and still he. Yeah.
And of course it was because she rejected him.
Mm-hmm.
Like he just is that kind of criminal.
Right.
Right.
He really is like just, I mean,
Just the worst.
Just the worst.
It's the
lying and the violence and
lying, manipulating, extorting people who you actively harmed by like taking their daughter from them. Fair to say, if not a rapist, he's at least sexually assaulted people, probably.
And he's 17. Like,
right.
Just bad all around.
Yeah, 17, and you kick someone in the face and then drop a cinder block on their head. That's
so brutal.
I mean, come on. No, sorry, not even dropped it, bashed her head in, which implies like repeated action.
Yeah. And just
anger management issues,
so much going
liar,
on.
Gambling addiction, it seems like.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think the parallels are kind of an odd thing in this case, that 5 years apart, these two women are killed by him, like exactly
on
5 years apart.
Day. That's so weird.
So strange. And so he's serving out his prison sentence in Peru, but he has another prison sentence in the US, not for the murder, but for the extortion charges.
Right.
But he's young. I mean, so I mean, he could like see the light of day. I think his Peru sentence is like 30 years-ish, and the US is like 20-ish years.
How do you only give somebody 30 years in prison when they've like murdered somebody in cold blood?
I know. Yeah. I don't know.
We're not talking like a manslaughter charge here. Like this is like blatant murder.
I guess because it wasn't premeditated, right? So it's like not first degree, perhaps.
Right.
I don't really know.
I mean, I guess prison's technically about rehabilitation. So
right.
If you can calm somebody's anger issues or whatever, maybe there's some hope. But
yeah, I don't know. I mean, you want people. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess everyone deserves that chance to rehabilitate themselves. But he sounds like someone with just like deep psychological issues.
And it sounds like little remorse, other than like he said he found Christ, but that doesn't necessarily indicate feeling guilt or remorse over your actions. It just means that you've decided to take up a religion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he did eventually confess to killing Stephanie Flores. So I guess there was some, although that was a harder one to snake out of.
I was going to say, it's like
there was so much, like there's video footage of them going into his hotel room, and then that's where she's found dead.
Like, would he have confessed if he didn't need to?
That's the question. Yeah.
Not worth speculating about because he did, but.
Right. It was just so obvious, I think, like all the years that she was missing, that like he probably killed her, but he was just walking free,
Yeah. The only other people that could have possibly been to blame were his two friends.
Right.
Which it seems like all they did was
they were in the car.
Not involved. They just picked him up.
That's kind of what it seems like. Yeah.
So imagine being them. Imagine that kind of guilt you must feel. Be like, oh my God, I didn't realize our friend was going to murder this person.
Although if he had this reputation of sort of like targeting young tourists, maybe they kind of knew, not murder, but like kind of knew that she was in a dangerous situation. Yeah, so this one's definitely a downer, but I guess the silver lining is that it was, it was a cold case kind of, for like they didn't have a confession, so it was like everyone assumed that Joran had done it, but without the confession, it was still sort of like a question mark kind of case, and now at least the mystery is solved.
Right. Yeah, which is better than a lot of similar cases like with Amy Lynn Bradley, where we still just don't know.
Right. Yeah, our podcast, I think, does a pretty good job of like going into that. But there's like so many there were sightings of her afterwards, and like more than one sightings. And she has distinctive tattoos, and that photo, it's all very
very
strange.
A little scary. I watched a whole video. It was a slightly humorous video, but it did touch on some serious stuff about how just terrifying cruise ships are. I've never been on a cruise. And I don't think I ever want to go on one now.
Yeah.
Between like people who just fall overboard, people who go missing like Amy Lynn Bradley. I remember there was like a viral video maybe like a year or two ago of a guy, presumably drunk guy, jumping off of the deck of a cruise ship and then just swimming and then just being lost because the ship was moving and it was night and he was just gone.
God.
And then there was another, I think it was a Carnival cruise where the sewage system just wasn't working.
Ugh,
and people couldn't use the toilets, and they were handed red biohazard bags and told to use those as their toilets.
Oh my God. Holy shit.
Literally.
Yeah. As soon as I said that, I was like, oh, gross.
Yeah. And also the air conditioning or something wasn't working. Like parts of the ship were just failing. So people were setting up makeshift tents on the deck of the ship with their sheets and sleeping out there.
Oh my God.
But then it started getting to a point where they were like fed up. And to help kind of apologize and calm them down, the crews decided to give out free drinks at the bar.
Oh, no.
Which you can imagine only just made people angrier and more rowdy.
Yeah.
So then they were like smearing shit all over the walls.
Oh, Jesus.
And they tried to dock somewhere and they got turned away because the ship smelled so bad.
Oh, my God. What a nightmare.
And then they weren't reimbursed for it. They were just given like a discount on their next cruise. And was like, I'm not coming back.
For your next cruise.
Me? Yeah, I was like, no way are you ever going on a boat again in your life.
They are expensive too, because it's, it's meals and entertainment and everything is all like included. But yeah, they don't hold much of appeal to me. Mm-mm. I love being on the water and like being near the ocean and everything, but yeah, they're so mammoth and
I'd go on like a little sailboat or something in like like some Gulf somewhere. What's that? The Riviera.
The French Riviera. Yeah.
Yeah. So not a Gulf, but the Riviera. Like I would go out on like a sailboat or something out there, right? Or like even like Lake Erie.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, I've gone on there's a island in the middle of Lake Erie called Put in Bay that my family used to go to every so often, which is very cool. You take a little boat out there and it's whatever. But like, man, just like a week on a boat going from California to Alaska, I'd be like, no, this sounds horrible.
Right. I don't know. I mean, I could see like the week on a boat if it's just like a smaller boat with like, being on a boat with like 1,000 people just doesn't sound like very much fun to me.
Right. Just a moving hotel.
Yeah.
Like the pools are crowded.
Right.
If something goes wrong, I mean, you're just stuck. You're just stuck there.
We have an article that I wrote about cruise ship disappearances, I think. Not deaths, disappearances. And obviously Bradley's on the list. And then there's like 6 or 7 more people who've also disappeared. And it's unclear what happened to them. So yeah, that's terrifying. Like what a horrible way if you fall off a cruise ship and...
Yeah. I mean, and sometimes all it takes is like you're drunk and you fall.
And a lot of people, a lot of them are all you can eat, all you can drink, all included kind of.
Right. So, I mean, it can happen very easily.
Definitely.
That goes for employees too. I mean, geez.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I mean, not even to mention the fact that, like you said, in this situation, they had to go catch a plane. So they had to be like, we don't know where she is, but I guess we got to leave. But sort of the same thing, even if you're just on the cruise and you dock somewhere and you get off for a bit and you don't make it back in time, the cruise isn't waiting for you.
That like just happened, I think, or something kind of similar. And I want to say it was somewhere in like Madagascar or something where these tourists were late getting back to the cruise and the captain was like, you're late, I'm not waiting for you, and he left and they're on some island. Yeah
Like that's scary, like because some of those places, those tourist trap places, are not places you want to be stuck. Like once the day is done and all the tourist stuff like that's it's a little not really a place you want to get stranded.
Well, just like being a foreigner and you don't know, especially if you're in a cruise going to a lot of different places, you might not know very much about the place or the language or anything, and just like not a great sitch, perhaps.
Might not have like cell connection. If you didn't pay for that international SIM card.
Yeah, exactly. I've seen pictures of like the Titanic and then like cruise ships, and there's like so much bigger than the Titanic. It's really insane because you think of the Titanic as being like this,
massive, luxurious.
Yeah, and it was the biggest, as we both know. We know everything about the Titanic.
Right.
At the time, but there's so much bigger now. It's kind of insane.
Right. There was another cruise ship. It was South Korean or Japanese, something like that. But basically they bought this like old kind of rundown cruise ship, added onto it just by kind of building upwards. And then it toppled over because they didn't properly balance it.
Oh, shit.
And the Coast Guard, I don't think really responded quickly enough.
Oh my God.
I'm pretty sure like the captain and the crew abandoned ship, leaving the passengers on the cruise ship as it was sinking. And it took like the efforts of the people in the islands nearby to go out on boats and try and get as many people as they could off.
This also happened, I think, near Italy. There's like another ship that, the ocean is terrifying. Like, I don't know. I would be scared no matter what vessel I'm on.
This one was 2014, the Seawolf ferry disaster, which also 300 people died on. It sank on April 16, 2014, killing 304 people, most of whom were high school students on their way to a field trip.
Oh, that's really horrible.
Yeah. Passengers were told repeatedly by the crew members to stay where they were as rescuers would arrive soon. Many of them listened to the instructions, remained in place as the ferry tilted sideways, water seeped in. And then the crew left, and then I'm pretty sure people were calling for like the death penalty for the captain and the crew.
It does seem pretty bad. I mean, especially as the captain, you're not supposed to abandon ship like that.
No, and you're not supposed to tell people to stay put.
No.
The ship is sinking.
It's supposed to be like the last person on board.
Right. So all that is to say, cruises and travel in general can be very dangerous if you're not properly prepared for it. Which to circle back to Natalee Holloway, they had 7 chaperones for 120 high school students, and there was sort of warning about this bar they went to being a little bit seedy.
Well, I don't know that warning, like, it was like, don't go to this bar. It's just like Natalee's mother had heard bad things once she learned where they had gone,
Oh, so after the fact.
Yeah, after the fact.
Okay.
Also, I don't think, Aruba's not like a huge place, so I don't think they had like tons of
fair
options. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's like, when you're 18, I think you feel like kind of immortal, but there is like a common sense thing when you're traveling as a woman to be like, don't go anywhere with a man you don't know.
Right.
Or if you do, like, tell your friends his name.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that it seems like most of this occurred because she got separated from people too, which that's really unfortunate.
Well, you feel safe, you're with your classmates, and it doesn't feel like a dangerous situation, I think.
Yeah, admittedly, I actually knew nothing about Aruba before this, other than that it was like a Caribbean island. I didn't realize like it was Dutch Caribbean. I don't know
much about it, but it does come up. I mean, it's come up in these like horrible stories. Which is my association
that's what I mean.
With
those touristy places, like they seem idyllic, and then I think certain types of people realize that people are going to be vulnerable when they're in those places. Because that, like you said, there's kind of that sense of security. If you're on a trip, if you're on a cruise, maybe you're not familiar with the area, you're a little bit naive, easier to take advantage of.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the case any popular destination. But yeah, the whole thing is just like a really tragic, horrible story. I think, and I mean, the whole thing is horrible. But I think one of the most horrible things is just that he didn't tell the truth for so long and lied about it, and only with his back against the wall did he finally give them closure.
It's like cowardly.
It's so cowardly. Yeah.
It's really like pathetic more than anything else, I think. And I don't feel bad saying that because he was not a good guy.
I don't think you should feel bad. No, it is pathetic and cowardly. And it wasn't like it was an accidental death at all. Like he brutally killed her. But I'm glad that they have the truth at least.
Yeah. It's insane how recently that bit of the story happened.
I know.
It's been about a year now, right? Since
October 2023. So yeah, not even a year.
Not even a year. Like 6 months ago. Well, yeah, here's hoping the family has some closure now.
Yeah. Yes. And if you want to learn more about this story, we have articles about Natalee and Joran on the site, and Amy Lynn Bradley and cruise ship disappearances and like all sorts of stuff like that. So
yeah, and more fun stuff if you need a little pick me up after the sadder story there,
and more fun stuff. I had a great time writing the news story today about the cherry stuff at George Washington's.
Yeah,
these bottles of cherries that are like 250 years old. They found in an old storeroom.
Yeah, very, very cool.
That was cool. That was fun.
And Washington was pretty well known for his Mount Vernon brewery. A distillery, that's what I meant. Sorry, yeah. Yes, distillery.
I think that was one of the facts we talked about with him that came up.
Yes, that he was like a whiskey head.
He loved to drink, And they all kind of did back then.
Right. It was cleaner than water.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The next episode is going to be, well, it actually is like kind of dark, but it's also like light and dark at the same time.
It's interesting because I'll give a little preview because I wrote recently The Truth About the Ring Around the Rosie nursery rhyme, which we will get into next time as well. But there are a lot of rumors that it's got this very dark, sinister backdrop to it with like ashes and people dying in the plague.
Right.
Probably really not the case. It turns out, as I was like researching it, turns out that's maybe really not true. That was like a later interpretation of it, but there's also several versions of that fairy tale that don't involve possible death. So it'll be kind of interesting to pick that apart and like look at like, okay, which of these fairy tales are actually really dark, which of them aren't. When I was in high school, I had a theory that Humpty Dumpty was about suicide.
Oh.
But I don't think that's true.
I think I don't think that's true, but it is about like some kind of weird dark stuff that people think.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it's interpretation. It's poetry in a way. So yeah, definitely interesting to get into and not quite as depressing, I think.
Yeah, it's all kind of speculation, so it's not like,
Right. Yeah, it's more just theories and interpretations, picking it apart. There is like, a level of like where we can trace back where this came from originally and
right. And there might be like a history thing about it, but
we're going to do something a little bit special for All That's Interesting members, people who have signed up on allthat'sinteresting.com/membership for $5 a month or, $50 a year if you get a little bit of a discount there. We're going to do an extended release, an extended cut of our next podcast episode, which is talking about nursery rhymes. So for anybody listening on the regular feed, nothing's changing. You're getting the same content you always get. But if you are an allthat'sinteresting.com member, you're going to get a few extra nursery rhymes thrown in there. Just a little bit more content as a thank you for supporting us over there.
But yeah, that'll be in 2 weeks. And then until then, you can always check out more stuff on the site. Or if you want to get even more cool stuff, you can join our newsletter by going to allthat'sinteresting.com/sign up, or you can even become a member at allthat'sinteresting.com/membership.
Yeah. Get those ad-free articles in a exclusive dark mode.
Whoa. Love dark mode.
So you don't burn your eyes when you're trying to read those late night true crime articles.
That's right. Yeah. You can also reach out to us. And so people have actually, we got in a couple emails and voicemails lately. But if you want to leave a voicemail, you can call us at 929-526-3029. Or you can email us at podcast@allthat'sinteresting.com.
Yeah, what was that recent
the voicemail
we got? Yeah, we had somebody call in and give us a little bit of a fun fact.
It's like their family history about the
I don't believe they left their name. So I can't actually shout them out. But if they're listening, we did get your story about the fact that Abraham Lincoln proposed to your great-grandmother and she turned him down. And yes, you could have been related to Abraham Lincoln, but you're not.
But you're not.
Because your great-grandmother said no. It's a fun story. It's very funny. I got a good chuckle out of it. So
I have a quick, not really an interesting fact about Mary Todd and Abraham Lincoln. There was like, their marriage has gone under a lot of scrutiny for, ever. Right. But when they were about to get married, there were some rumors that like maybe Lincoln had been pressured into it somehow. I might have mentioned this when we had our Lincoln fact thing, actually. But anyway, someone mentioned he looked like he was going to slaughter on the day of the wedding. And as Lincoln was dressing for the wedding, someone asked him where he was going. And he responded, "I guess I'm going to hell." And that's how their marriage started.
Wow. Abraham Lincoln, he's a boomer comedian. He was
funny. He had a sense of humor.
He's every dad in an 80s sitcom who's like, "Oh, my ball and chain, my wife over here.
Going to hell.
I'm going to hell. Hear that, brother."
But, I mean, this could be a different podcast, but their marriage is really fascinating. Anyway. But yeah, we enjoyed getting that voicemail. And then there were emails, I think.
Oh, yeah. Somebody was requesting.
Oh, yeah.
If we could do a series on the American Civil War, a listener from the UK.
Oh, and then we really got into that.
I will say, cool. That actually like kicked off a whole brainstorm session between us and our producer and our editor.
Yeah.
So maybe we might, because we have a lot of stories on the American Civil War.
Yeah.
And I never really considered that other countries probably don't talk about that, in my very American centric growing up.
Right.
Like it's such a common thing that we talk about.
Well, we talk about it, but there's so many stories that I think have been forgotten or just kind of
right, which is kind of
little
what
weird things
we try to carve out our little niche there.
Right, exactly.
So who knows? Maybe down the line. I mean, you've kind of already outlined it, Kalina. So I think it's very possible that could happen. So yeah, I don't know if you're listening to this one, maybe let us know if that's something you'd be interested in, or if you have any other ideas for series we could tackle or episodes you'd like to hear. If you've read anything interesting on allthisinteresting.com that we haven't covered in a podcast, let us know.
Love to hear it. Love to hear it.
And you can also check us out on social media, on TikTok at Real History Uncovered, on Instagram at History Uncovered Podcast, and on YouTube, where you might already be listening to this. But all right, everybody, thanks for listening.
Yes, till next time.